Alright, okay, good evening. Okay, welcome to today's session over here. So again, as usual, what we're gonna do is I will walk you through the analysis and some of the potential trades that I'm looking at for the week, and then we'll jump into a quick Q&A, where if you have any questions, you can just type it in, then we'll be answering those questions. And then we'll do a quick wrap up of today's session and update you on some of the upcoming events, in particular offline events that we're gonna have in July. Okay, so starting off here, I'll do a very quick review of what happened last week. Okay, so last week we did have the Canadian CPI coming in lower than expected. And of course that gave the CAD a little bit of a weakness over there, and we did mention about dollar CAD last week as well. If you manage to catch on to that trade, you should be at least in some decent upside or decent profits. We'll take a look at that today as well. And dollar CAD is naturally one of the pairs that I'm also looking out for this week here, right? So if let's say last week you did not manage to catch it, I think the opportunity is still available within this week. Okay. Last week was pretty much quite quiet, so not many significant news. Only the CAD CPI was quite important. And then if you take a look at this week here, the two focus is gonna be RBA happening tomorrow. The expectation over here you can see is that we are not expecting any changes in interest rate. So any surprise, make sure you're aware of it. We may, if there's a surprise, we may see huge volatility coming in. Okay, that's one, which is happening tomorrow afternoon, and then on Friday we have the NFP, which is usual, right? Every first Friday of the month. So NFP over here kind of mixed. Okay, average hourly earnings remain at 0.3. That's the expectation. NFP is 222,000. Still pretty strong number, I would say. If the actual data comes out, about 200,000, I think that's still solid. The expectation here is for unemployment rate to drop from 3.7 to 3.6. I think that's going to be an important data to keep track. The idea here is if we do see unemployment actually coming back down, that gives the Fed more leeway in saying that we can continue to do a little bit more of a rate hike, simply because the economy is perhaps still pretty resilient, right? However, if let's say unemployment rate does stays at 3.7 or even go higher than 3.7, that will indicate to the Fed that perhaps they need to start being cautious of being too aggressive hiking anymore. That may hurt the US economy, right? Especially from a labor market point of view. So I think unemployment rate on Friday is going to be quite crucial in contributing to some of these movements and volatility in the dollar side. So just be aware in terms of this week here, we do have the US data coming in the on Friday, okay, together with the CAD. And then tomorrow we have the RBA, right? So some of these instruments that if you're trading, just be aware that you may experience some greater volatility as these news are being released. Okay. Now with that said, let's take a look at the technical charts portion. Starting off here is the dollar index. Okay, so dollar index as of last week. Okay, we may have completed a simple three-wave move with a recent high around 103.5. And from there on Friday, we kind of see a little bit of a dip, a little bit of a pullback. So right now, going into this week here, I would primarily expect this three wave to be done as a simple 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 ABC. So if this is going to be a complete 5 and a three wave done, we can actually expect the market to start moving lower and potentially break the previous low around 101.90. Okay, basically this level. So what the idea of dollar index here is, we are looking at bearish bias for the week, understanding that we do have NFP coming in on Friday, which means that we may see the market do a little bit of a consolidation all the way until Friday. And when the data is being released, Right? Looking at the dollar index chart, I would be primarily focusing on sell opportunity. In other words, if you're going to see this consolidate all the way until Friday, I'll be looking for a potential sell on the dollar. Okay, of course, I don't trade the dollar index directly. We'll be looking at some of the major pairs to sell the dollar. And if let's say the data comes out and in fact weakens the dollar, then that would be a very decent trade for this week. Okay, so that's my primary view for the dollar this week here. Now, if you translate that to the euro, okay, so that's where kind of inverse the relationship. I'm generally bullish. However, I'm just maintaining a little bit of a neutral as of today's perspective, right? Because I look at the charts every day in the morning. So for Monday today, I'm still a little bit neutral because this can still come back down before the push up, or this can basically just consolidate here and we get a push up. Okay. The idea is the tree wave may have completed as well because price from this low has already broken the previous low. So from a very simple technical Elliott wave pattern, basically a tree wave pattern, this kind of structure where price has broken the previous low is considered a completed tree wave. Of course, it did not really hit our Fibs area, and that's the part where right now I'm just looking at it from an angle where if this comes back down, I'm not going to be surprised because then that will complete the Fib expectation. We'll look for upside. Alternative, as I mentioned, if let's say from now until Friday, just do a consolidation here. Then I won't expect to be waiting for a trade here. I'll be more than happy if let's say this just takes off. I'll be happy to just get involved in the buy as a breakout. Right. So I think euro dollar over here, the timing to execute a trade would likely only build in as we go into NFP. Okay. So the technique to execute a trade in line with a news release, you probably want to look into a breakout technique instead of like a limit order. Okay, so you probably want to consider on that. So that's my take on euro. Okay, quite straightforward. GBP USD, if you ask me, is actually a little bit cleaner in terms of the structure that is developing because we can see very clear 1, 2, 3. Okay, do ignore the channel over here. If I were to update this a little bit, it's probably going to be looking something like this, right? Of course, it's not going to be very, very nice, but the trend line is simply just to communicate the idea of a three-wave completion. Okay, and not only a three-wave simple completion, but last week we did get a pretty nice bounce off the low at 1.2590. So to me, this is a little bit of a rejection of a V shape. So if we can get again a consolidation here building into NFP, we'll be looking for upside. So I would then compare between the euro dollar as well as the pound dollar pair, which would give me a clearer and cleaner structure to take the trade to the upside. So this too, generally the directional bias is bullish. I'll be focusing on buy opportunities, leveraging on NFP this coming Friday. Okay, so I think quite clear structure and potential targets for GBP USD would be around 1.2920. Of course, we don't expect NFP comes out and then immediately this hits the target. But then we're looking at a swing trade opportunity, leveraging on the news release as a catalyst to get involved in the trade, right? So the trade we can put, ideally we can execute it on Friday. Perhaps we might be holding on to that trade until the next week, maybe Monday or Tuesday or even Wednesday, to actually realize the target if that's going to be the ideal case, right? So do take note, right? When I have this target here, it doesn't mean that we're just expecting on NFP to immediately hit it, right? So I think euro and pound definitely opportunities to keep an eye on. Aussie dollar over here, I'm just simply neutral. The reason for staying neutral is we did have this very strong little up push. The market came back down, tested the 618, have a little bit of a reaction, but this reaction here is not very impulsive in nature. It's looking pretty corrective. Okay, however, looking for sell around this zone for this drop may not be the most ideal context to be selling, right? The idea is, again, this has came down quite a bit. Selling here, your target may not be huge, and I would personally not just focus on something like this. So Aussie dollar, I would just suggest maybe leave it aside, focus on things that may worth more of your attention. Then we have dollar Canadian, right? So dollar Canadian is where I think this week definitely you want to keep an eye on as well. So last week we did mention a little bit about the crawl. Okay, this was a very nice little break. I managed to take a breakout here around 1.3180. Okay, so very nice little trade. Basically shift stops to break even. If this just keeps taking off, then of course that little buy will be quite nice. If this starts to pull back a little bit more, I may end up, tagging my previous entry over here at a break even, and then I'll just simply look for a re-entry, right? So basically I'm still interested in the buy. The pattern over here is quite straightforward. We get an impulse push. This looks pretty corrective. We do have high impact Canadian data as well as high impact dollar coming in on Friday. So my expectation is from now until Friday, there's a very good chance this would just consolidate, and that would develop what we have impulse correction, expect the upside. Right, so two ways to get involved, of course. If this pulls back towards the 50 and 618, you can look for the buy. Alternatively, if this just keeps coming down like that, you can put in a trend line. You can look for some near-term high points as a potential breakout trade. So if you take a look at the dollar index, which were generally bearish in terms of the dollar, then coming into dollar CAD, we're looking at potentially buying the dollar CAD. Some of you may be, confused, right? How come the general direction for dollar is down, but dollar CAD here we're looking at upside? So you need to be also aware that whenever we look at a certain currency pair, there are two factors that's contributing to the price movement. One is, of course, the dollar here in dollar CAD, and then the other one is the Canadian within it. So the dollar may weaken, but at the same time, if let's say Canadian weaken more than the dollar relatively, this pair can actually still move higher. Okay. So my approach to simplify things, right? My approach whenever I look at a chart, I just trade what the pattern of the chart is telling me, and then I'll just kind of find alignment with the other side of things, right? So like what I mentioned, the dollar here we're looking at bearish. If let's say at one point we look at dollar Canadian and dollar Canadian is telling us to sell, then that's where I say we have an alignment. Okay, but if there's no alignment, do I still take the trade? Yes. Okay, because alignment to me is one portion in my criteria, but it's not like the most significant one, right? The majority of my decision making process to come back to is, do we have a clear pattern? Do we have a clear structure? So this is also a potential news trade, because on Friday, at the same time, depending on where you are, at the same time when NFP is released, we do have the CAD labor market data as well. Okay, so that's on dollar CAD. Dollar yen here, I'm neutral now, but I'm actually more interested in sell ideas, right? I'm not interested in the buy. I'm neutral because I want to wait for more confirmation where I want to see a strong break below this level first, around 144.15. After we get a strong break below that level, I want to wait for a corrective pullback. Then I'll be more committed to any sell setups that I can get. Right, so keep an eye on this. I don't think we're gonna get any concrete sell trades within this week. But of course, if you're aggressive, you can consider a breakout of this level around 144.15 to get involved in the trade. Okay, so again, depending on your entry criteria, depending on the strategy that you use, you may or may not get a trade this week. But for me, I'll simply wait for more confirmation, which means this week unlikely I'm gonna get anything from dollar yen. Then we have gold. Okay, so gold over here, I think last week we did cover, so I'm not too keen in selling it anymore, simply because of the patterns that we're seeing. I'm more interested in the buy. We have yet to really see some concrete rejection. We do have a little bit of a bounce here from the low at 1892. If we can get a corrective structure here, that is still that good chance that this may bounce higher. But unless we can clear off this trend line impulsively, okay, clear off impulsively means that this may consolidate, push up a little bit, consolidate it, and then push up again. This is what we call a clear of it. Okay, a tiny break doesn't mean anything. Okay, we want an impulsive break above this structure. If you can get that, then any pullback means we're quite confident in the upside. But for now, if price is still below this structure of a trend line, any corrective structure over here may only be seen as a short-term buy. because once the market tag this, it can actually just reverse and come back down. Okay, so it can do something like this. You can see, right? It tag it just reverse. So this can just simply complete a simple 1, 2, 3, tag the high and then bounce lower. Okay, so if you are looking at short term, you may consider buy, but for me as a swing trade, I just want to wait for price to really break through any pullback. Then I'll be more interested and convinced that it can go higher. Okay, so that's on XAU. And then on crude oil over here, not the most ideal trade setup right now, but we're generally bullish on this, right? But this structure seems to suggest that we may temporarily get a pullback first. Okay, so if you are looking at crude oil, overall direction is still upside, simply because this pattern here suggests that higher probability is definitely to the upside. But internally, this isn't a buy setup, right? This tells us that a pullback may come. So if you're interested on crude oil, suggestion is give it some time, wait for a pullback, see if we can get it back towards 69.3, 68.75, then only we look for the buy. Alright, so that's on crude oil. S&P in general, as a US equities market, we did break that previous high last week as the market closed off, but I'm very, very cautious in the buy right now. Okay, the reason is because the market tends to develop in tree. Now, it does not need to do it, I always say it, but we always anticipate it to develop in tree move. So what is a tree move? This is an example. 1, 2, 3, right? You kind of broke that previous high and then just U-turn to complete the tree, and then it takes off. So quite a similar pattern that we are anticipating over here. It broke that high, but doesn't mean it will just take off. So to be more conservative, I would expect this to come back down before another pushback up. The overall direction that I'm interested in for S&P, and I would suggest you to focus, is definitely upside, right? We're in the bull market already. Just based on the charts, based on price movement, we're in a bull market. But of course, you do not want to get involved in the buy at the very, very top, right? You always want to wait for a decent pullback before you get involved. So I think this week, S&P may not give us a setup, okay? And for me, I'll not focus a lot. I'll not put a lot of attention onto this. Okay? So that's my view on that. Bitcoin, I think that we are in the bull market already, quite similar to, I would say S&P, right? Generally, there is some relationship between that two. However, one thing that I'm not too convinced is that this little push is obviously very strong, right? And if I just take a simple kind of like time duration, okay, so this is the duration that price took, right, to develop that impulse. You do realize that let me just string this here, right? You do realize that the correction is almost about the same, right? I mean, it's maybe a little bit longer, but it's not 2x yet, right? So most of the time I would want to expect a very clean, if this takes up like maybe I think 2-3 days, this would ideally want to give it about like 4 to 6 days, right? So that's what I mean by 2x. So based on just the visual cue on this, it's not really there yet. Right? So what this means is that there's a good chance that Bitcoin may develop maybe into a bigger correction before the upside. Okay, so that's something that I'm prepared, and I would be anticipating that the market may do something like this. Like whether is it gonna do it or it's just gonna take off from here, I think again nobody would know, right? No traders would know for sure what is gonna happen. But what we can do is we can always pre-plan ahead of the market. So my take here is definitely bullish. I would say that any decent pullback would be a buy opportunity. Again, you need to fall back to what is the strategy that you're using to execute and manage your trade. Can you be more aggressive in buying first? Then if it does a deeper pullback, you add on a second position as a longer term trade. The answer is definitely yes, right? But if you don't have any plan to that, you need to start crafting, your trading plan if you are trading the Bitcoin market, right? I mean, you need to be very clear for example, my approach to trade the currency market is very different from my approach investing into equities. It's also very different from my approach trading the crypto market. Okay, so you just need to be very clear on it, right? Because some instruments, some assets in the financial market, has certain characteristics, and certain market would have a overall general long-term directional bias, right? Like for example, equities, I will not be too eager to sell it, right? Especially in the long run, I'll be more interested in looking for buy opportunities, right? Because equities in the long run is always gonna go up eventually. Right, so these are some of the views that I have for the week. So to quickly summarize, like some of the key highlights, potential opportunities to focus, definitely is going to be euro, dollar, pound dollar, these two. Dollar Canadian as well, right? These are some of the related instruments that you can write on the catalyst or NFP. Okay, gold here, if you're looking at maybe short term, I mean, right now is moving up, right? Dollar is weakening, gold is strengthening. Short term, there is an upside, but if you're more of a swing, my suggestion is just be patient. Okay, Bitcoin here, we do have an upside as well. But again, depending on strategy, depending on technique of management, you need to make a decision as to are you going to be more aggressive in entering buys, or you're going to be a little bit more patient onto that. All right. Okay, good. So with that, I'll take a couple of questions that I see. Okay, and then I'll update you guys in terms of some of the events that we're gonna run in July. So I think the first question I see here is from Jay, right? Jay is asking, what is my thought on the rumor that BOJ is gonna intervene? Should we be cautious on the dollar yen pairs or XXX yen pairs, right? Yeah. So if you're keeping in touch with what's happening in the fundamental aspect of the market, last week there are news coming from BOJ, Bank of Japan, saying that they may intervene, right? There was once previously in the past that they did intervene. Now I'm aware of that news as well. Okay, and what BOJ actually basically mentioned is that if the yen price move off too significantly in a relatively short period of time, they will likely intervene. Okay. However, they are not gonna intervene just simply because of the yen weakness, right? So that is that slight details to take note. To put it into simple layman understanding, the idea is if the yen suddenly move a lot, they would probably intervene. But if the yen weakens over time, they'll let it float as it is, right? So the idea is if they see some short-term volatility that's going to hurt the yen, they're going to step in and take certain action to kind of prevent that shock, right? Prevent that kind of volatility. So if you ask me, will I put that into a huge consideration as to whether I should buy or sell the yen? Probably not. Okay, because again, you never know when they're going to intervene or when they're not going to intervene. Are they going to be buying up the yen or are they going to selling up the yen? We have no idea what's going to happen. So it's important to be aware of all these fundamentals development, because obviously when BOJ intervene, it is going to move the market, right? It's not going to come in with small size, it's going to come in big. Okay. So you need to be very clear, like what is going to contribute most to your trading decision. Like for me, it's definitely the charts. The fundamentals give a backdrop understanding, gives me some additional information to work on. So most yen pairs, my take here is I would personally not focus on the buy. I would personally focus a little bit more on the sell side. But that doesn't mean the yen pairs can't go up, right? So like dollar yen, I think we explained on that. Pound yen here, I'm actually more into the sell opportunity. I'm not too keen in buying it, but I'm waiting for a sell setup, right? Again, depending on how aggressive you are, for me, I would personally wait for a break, impulsively pull back, then only I'll look for a sell. How low this can go, obviously, we won't know for sure now. But short-term expectation, I'm basically looking at something like this, right? Aussie yen, I'm also bearish onto that, right? You probably want to just ignore the channel because some traders will draw this and say it's a break of the channel. To me, channel is a reference, is a guide, right? I think more important to me is how price is developing. Okay, there is a difference between this break. If you draw that channel like that, there's a difference between this break and this break. Okay, I mean visually you can see the difference of it, right? One is what we call impulsive break. This here is not an impulsive break. Okay, so if it's not an impulsive break, I wouldn't be putting too much weight on saying that, oh, the channel is broken, right? Because this again is a visual cue. We always can adjust accordingly depending on how price develop. I mean, from here, if it starts to come down, we'll probably just adjust it and we'll say that, oh, market is still within the channel, right? So I don't put too much weight on the channel, but I think looking at this development here is definitely corrective in nature right now. There's a high probability we'll see a little bit more of a downside first. Okay? But of course, as a whole, this structure here suggests eventually upside. Okay, unless perhaps what can turn this entire piece here is this comes down, okay, and then this does the development, okay, and it breaks this channel at the bottom impulsively, then this changed the entire structure. We may look at it as a different pattern. Maybe this is a running flat from Elliott Wave, so this is a 1 2 1 2 3 4 5, and it is opening up downside. Okay, but that's like, we need the market to develop first. We can't really anticipate so much right now. But for now, I would say most yen pairs, my bias is definitely to the downside, right? I'm not too keen in looking for buy. I'm more interested if we can get a sell trade in some of these yen pairs. Okay. Some of you are asking about some certain pairs, right? So like Euro Pound, very nice little trade. For those of you who managed to take the trade at the top here, I think last week we did share this as well. Maybe not Monday. I think Monday we shared a little bit more upside, but we updated this on the midweek, right? Saying that if this goes up, close the buy, look for sell. I think this is a very, very decent trade. So updating on this, again, if you can get a corrective move here, any pullback correctively can be seen as a sell, right? With a target at 8480. Okay, so quite simple, quite clean structure. 1 2 3, 1 2 3, right? So I think again, if you're into this pair, you can look for a sell. Okay. Pound Aussie, probably not much. I'm still waiting for this to break this low here. I think today we might get that break. But that break to me is not a sell. Again, I want to see an impulsive break. If this just goes down slow, that's not convincing at all. And then if you can get an impulsive break, any pullback will be a sell trade opportunity with this as a bigger double top. Again, this would probably need to wait a little bit while. Okay. Asia Index, A50 and Hong Kong. Okay, so A50 we did get a little bit of a bounce here. Let's take a look at Hong Kong. Okay, I think we covered this like last week as well. Very nice little bounce off that 618. Okay. So if I were to put in a little bit of a label here, right? We can't tag this already right now. Okay, so I would say if you manage, based on the sharing that we did last week, if you manage to buy in here, you may want to consider take a little bit of a profit off the table, maybe then shift your stops to break even, etc. And then monitor how price is going to react off this area, right? Because what can happen is this may just end up as a simple three-wave correction, and this can come back and retest maybe the low or develop into another pattern before the pushback. So you may not want, if you're buying it, you may not want to give away too much of your profit. So you may want to take partial profits, shift stops to break even, and manage it. Okay. If this decides to do a little bit of a slow development here, the higher chance is probably going to come down. If this here starts to develop into a correction, okay, then of course you can expect maybe a little bit more upside. Ideally, you want the upside to keep going impulsively. Okay. Because if this eventually developed into something like that, right? Okay, so it develops very, very correctively as a whole, then this becomes an impulse correction downside. Okay, so you want to monitor as price continue to develop, on a regular basis, look at the patterns. Okay. So I think right now, if you don't have any trade, my suggestion is just be neutral, observe how it's going to develop, then only make a decision buy or sell. A50, I think you probably would want to follow what I mentioned on Hong Kong, HSI, okay, because A50 here, we don't have a very, very clean structure as compared to Hang Seng. Okay, this is not a very clean 1, 2, 3, right? But we did get this push, right? So same thing here. Observe how the market is going to develop at this price point. If you're going to get a pullback correctively, of course, then upside. If this starts to form a crawl, then obviously you don't want to be buying in, right? So I think A50 not so clear. Hang Seng is a bit cleaner. Okay. Dan here has a couple of pairs as well. Okay, so I think Pound Aussie we covered onto that already. Kiwi Cat. Kiwi Cat, quick take here is we did bounce off that low, V shape. Wait for a pullback, right? I mean, you definitely do not want to be buying it at the top. There's no reason to be selling there. So my take on Kiwi Cat here is wait for a corrective pullback, and then you can look to take this up. Okay, maybe not so far to the upside, but keep an eye on this area. Okay, because from a bigger scheme of things, if the market just comes back up here and does a bit of a rejection, you get an expanding flat structure. So you get this as an impulse, you get this as expanding flat, then this can still come back down. Okay. Yeah, so keep an eye on that. But of course, you know, we can always discuss when price is nearer to the top. But for now, I think what's more relevant is if you can get a corrective pullback, then we'll be looking at upside. Okay. Kiwi Franc. To be honest, very similar to Kiwi Cat, right? So kind of have this little bottom here, V-shaped formation. So same thing, any form of a pullback, look for upside with your target back at this recent high. Okay, so that will be the idea of it, right? So again, Kiwi Cat, Kiwi Franc, I think both are quite similar in terms of the development of patterns. So pay attention to the risk exposure as well. Okay. Good. Charles has a question over here as well. Not into crypto trading yet. But may I know about platforms regulated by SEC Malaysia? Will it be facing some problems? A crypto platforms. If you're asking regulation locally here in Malaysia, I think there's only like 2 or 3, if I'm not mistaken, that is really regulated from SEC, Malaysia. Okay, but those that are regulated locally in Malaysia, they only offer you Bitcoin, Ethereum, and perhaps USDT, right? If I'm not mistaken. So basically, you can only use, or I would say you can only buy some of those like huge major coins like Bitcoin, Ethereum. Okay, and you don't have futures options to trade it. You don't have CFDs options to trade it. You basically only have the options to buy the spot market. So it's not designed to do trading. It's designed for you to say, okay, if I want to buy a whole Bitcoin or Ethereum for the long run, you can naturally use it, right? I know one of the platform that is regulated by Malaysia regulation in crypto space is Luno. But I don't use it at all, right? Because I don't buy a whole Bitcoin. There's no reason for me doing that. I only want to trade short term in and out, right? Yeah, so of course, in terms of safety of platform, I can't guarantee you anything, right? I'm not representing the companies. I don't work inside the company, so I won't know. You definitely need to do your own due diligence, right? In terms of some of these platforms that you want to use for crypto. Okay. Is there a risk? Possibly, right? I mean, like in crypto space, one of the bigger ones like FTX, end up closing down, right? So all these things are what we call market risk. Is beyond the price fluctuation of the asset itself. It's beyond just trading risk, but it's more of a something that you need to accept, right? Especially in a space where it's still not that regulated. Okay, yeah. Yeah. So I hope that gives you an idea. That's my take, right? That's my point of view. Okay. Good. Okay, I think I'll take a couple questions and then we'll kind of like wrap up the sessions in a while. So I see some questions over here as well from Jay, right? So Jay kind of asks on dollar pair, I noticed most pair on daily or weekly time frame is creating a flat pattern. Is the dollar fundamentally slowly weakening? Market sentiment is leading on dollar sell. The answer is, I mean, probably yes. I mean, I've been sharing that dollar fundamentals eventually will shift to sell, right? The reason is because fundamentally the Fed will eventually need to cut rate, and often that means weakening of the currencies, right? When the Fed actually cut interest rate. So I don't think you really need to look into the daily structure. Okay, DXY daily may not be that clear. But if you just take a look at like from the peak in 2022 September, right, last year, traders are potentially really pricing in the fact that the dollar will eventually weaken, right? You can see that, right? So most of the time, you need to understand price starts to move before the news takes place, because we have this thing called the price in effect, right? Price in is basically, as a trader, as investors, we always anticipate what will happen in the future. The difference is just the horizon perspective, right? Some traders are longer term, some traders are shorter term, but we're basically always anticipating what's going to happen in the future. And then, of course, we're going to make decision based on, is that expectation in the future still valid, okay? And that's what we are basically looking at the Fed doing right now, okay? If the Fed, I mean, the latest announcement was they're still considering 2 rate hikes, maybe this year, July, right, this month, and then another one in December. That's what the Fed mentioned, right? But my take over here, I would say, is I'm leaning towards the Fed may not hike it 2 times. The Fed may not even need to hike it anymore, okay? And I would say generally that's my take. And basically that's priced in, right? Because I'm not gonna be too keen in a long-term picture to be buying up the dollar anymore, because fundamentally I'm shifting more towards the Fed is gonna cut. Okay. So do take note of that. Okay. But that doesn't mean the dollar is just gonna collapse, right? It's generally long-term bearish, but that doesn't mean the market cannot go higher, right? Because in the bear market, price still can go up. In the bull market, the price can still come down. All right. Okay. I think Kenneth is asking how and when to use FIB retracement extension. That would be a little bit more of a, I would say, advanced question. The idea here is you probably want to understand a little bit more of the FIBs first, right? So in terms of like extension, I use it to measure most of the time a 3-wave move. Okay, we measure equal leg, right? Basically, we call it 1:1. The retracement tool, we use it mainly for, as the name suggests, right? Retracement. So idea like, dollar Canadian, you can see the FIB retracement here. Basically, we're measuring from this low to this high. Where's the 50 and the 61% mark, right? So they do serve a slightly different purposes. Okay, extension, we usually use it to measure equal movement. Retracement, we usually use to measure after a strong push, where would the market likely pull back towards. Right? That's the general kind of like idea between these two. Okay, and when we use which one. Okay. Okay, last one here from Wayne. Euro Canadian, right? Okay. Euro CAD, basically from what I'm seeing in this structure, quite clear. Very corrective in nature, so naturally I'll start to put in a little bit of a channel structure for visual cue. 3-wave structure over here, I think we are likely developing that, right? So again, when to use extension, you realize 3-wave. That's where I start to put in a little bit of extension. Okay, so we may see a little bit more upside over here. If you're more of a short-term trader, I think you can look for a short-term buy. If you get, again, a tiny bit of a correction and consolidation here, then you can get a push up. Okay, once price reach this target, you may want to consider maybe of a sell, right? Because look at it on a bigger scheme of things, that's where you get this as an impulse correction impulse, right? Okay, the short term, you can potentially catch this, and then once it tagged here, you want to be careful, right? So very, very similar to patterns that we talk about in terms of euro pound. Okay. So if you look at this, right, it's actually quite similar to euro pound when it was here, right? So when it was here, basically Euro Pound we shared is, short-term upside to expect completion of a tree wave. After that, look for the down. And then this is what happens in Euro Pound, right? Very nice structure. So pattern tends to repeat, right? So if you're looking at EuroCAD right now, we're basically looking at similar pattern. Okay, looking at this upside and then down, right? Obviously, it's not going to be like every time the same development is going to be 100% like that. No, right? But there's high probability this would repeat itself, and then you just capitalize on the probability and the statistics of it. Okay, good. So with that, let me quickly wrap up the session over here with some of the upcoming events in terms of like physical events that we have in the month of July. Okay, so over here we have 3 physical events in July. Okay, so they're all happening on Saturday. Some of these are in English. One of it will be conducted in Chinese. Okay, so they're all Saturdays starting this coming Saturday, right? So if you'd like to RSVP for this, if you're in Zoom, okay, you can click on the link that they are posted on the chat. There's a WhatsApp direction to it. If you're on YouTube, okay, there is actually a description link below as well in the YouTube stream. If you're watching this on Trading Live platform, you can go over to my Instagram or my social media or my bio. There's a link that you can click as well. Okay, so the first event that's happening on the 8th, which is this Saturday, is going to be talking about crypto trading. Okay, so actually this event is kind of organized by Trading Live. Okay, I'll be speaking there related topics on crypto trading. If you're interested in it, you can join us. That's going to be on 8th of July, 1 p.m. to 5:30. And then we have 2 other events here that's organized by Everything Trading. Okay, so the first one for this session here is on the 15th, which is going to be in English, right? We're going to be talking about harnessing market correlation, how to use this concept of market correlation to potentially profit from the market, as well as limit your downside, right? How you can manage your risk, understand the correlationship in the markets to control your risk exposure, at the same time profit from it. So this event on the 15th of July is going to be at iSpace 3 to 6 p.m. And then the following Saturday, which is on the 22nd of July, is going to be the same topic, market correlation, but we're going to be conducting it in Chinese, right? The venue is slightly different. The Chinese session is going to be on Amara Hotel. Timing wise, it's also 3 to 6 p.m. On Saturday, right? So again, you need to RSVP for it. I've already shared with you just now in terms of the links, where to click and things like that to RSVP, because again, we need to prepare the seats if you're joining. Okay, so these are the 3 physical events that we have for July. Okay, so if you're keen in any of this, do feel free to register, and we'll see you there on that day. Okay, so great. That's all from me for my side for today. Okay, so all the best to your trading for this week, and with that, we'll end off today's session here, and we'll see you guys in the next one. Okay, see you. Bye bye.